Bidet Critters. My name is Josh, and I made this right here, which is the beacon, or my interpretation of the beacon from Critical Role. I made it and I put it up on the internet, and a whole bunch of people liked it and wanted to know how I made it. So I'm gonna go through a quick explanation of how I put it all together, what kind of parts went into it, and then we'll go from there. A quick disclaimer on this. This is kind of fragile in its own way. It is made of glass and metal in the core components, so just keep that in mind when you're working on it. We wouldn't ever want anybody hurting themselves. So here we go. So it's essentially made of like two main parts. There's the outer shell that comes with, I put a sort of magnetized base on it, and then there's the lighting that goes inside of it, which is really kind of important to getting it all right. So we'll kind of start with the outer shell. That's the part I was talking about that is made out of metal and glass. And the way that I did that was real easy. Well, kind of easy. I took a terrarium. So my wife bought this at Target. They're like $10. Does not come complete with rocks, which this one does have in it. But this is just your standard. It has to be a dodecahedron. So just make sure that you're buying a dodecahedron. Believe it or not, there's like 800 billion different shapes of these, so you want the dodecahedron if you want to be lore accurate. Most terrariums, or all terrariums, come with a sort of lid. And that's important to take note of, because we're actually going to take the lid off. That's kind of one of the trickiest and most dangerous parts of working with the terrarium, and again, kind of why if you can find a plastic shape, you might be better off. I just really like the effect the glass has with the paint. So what I did with the terrarium for preparation to make it into this is, this handle base actually needs to come off, okay? So you'll see that there's hinges there, and there's this little handle here. Pretty easy to get off with a pair of wire cutters. Most folks have these laying around the house. If you don't, highly recommend them. All kinds of helpful. But just clipped that, clipped this. Again, this is the cautious part. If you're putting too much pressure on the metal seams in there with these, you could fracture the glass. So again, be careful, kind of take your time, work it off. They're mostly just glued or soldered in there, so take it away. Once you've got that off, you're going to have the two core components of your dodecahedron. You're going to have the main shape here, and this is the base here, okay? The next thing you want to do is you want to affix the handles. That's like one of the main defining features of this for me was the handles. And that's also kind of the other big pain in the butt, because glass, metal handles, how are you going to get those on there? Again, if you've got the time or the willpower, you can probably build handles, cut them from EVA foam, things like that. I went out to my local hardware store and I bought a couple 2.5-inch handles. I based that just off of the size of my terrarium. So this guy is about 9.5 inches across. I knew this was about 2.5 inches here, so I need to get, or 3 inches here, so I need to get something that fit in there. So I nabbed the handles. They were 25 cents each, maybe a little bit more. Throw them on there. The way I got those to adhere was using construction caulk. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of caulk. You want the kind that adheres to glass and plastic. Not glass and plastic, excuse me, glass and metal. Go figure. Nab this, take it, throw it on the end of your handles, stick one on, let it set for about 30 seconds, and then walk away and let it dry, and then do the other one on the opposing side, and you'll have your handles here and here. So now you've got your basic shape with your handles, an open space to adhere things, so on and so forth. The next step is going to be to paint the shape. So I'm a miniature painter, and so I have a whole mess of Citadel primer paints. Primer paints, you can do this all with primer paints. So you don't have to prime and then throw other paints on top of it. It's a whole lot of messing around. The key here, I use 3 different colors, but again, depending on the effects you want, you can use other kinds of colors. But the key here is kind of, you do not want to go heavy with that primer. So I primed actually initially using a black primer, and I ran that primer all along the seams and in the corners to give it a little depth. So when you look at this and it kind of shifts in the light, when you look into it, you see kind of, you don't see the whole light go. It'll fade and then reappear in the next visual of it. That's kind of important to keeping the depth. And what I was trying to capture there is when Matt talks about folks looking into the dodecahedron, they kind of fall into it. And that was the intent there, is that black primer is actually thicker and not transparent. Then take blue primer, you know, maybe a lighter gray than this, which is what I used. But you're gonna very, very gently kind of sitting out away from it, and also practice ventilation if you're ever spray painting, guys. Do it outside, do it with a mask on. Please don't kill yourself with primer. But very gently kind of sprayed over this guy, giving it a light blue sheen, letting it get a little heavier again on those solid seams. But definitely making sure that it's still transparent here. You go too heavy with this stuff, and you're going to end up with just a blue dodecahedron that nothing shines through, okay? Now, once that's all dried down, you can go ahead and do your gold effects. Again, Citadel makes shiny gold primer, real nice. You're going to start by taking your primer, you're going to have it at an angle like this, and you're going to hit those handles. Now you'll see the handles have sort of a gradient to them. You don't have to paint all the way down into the blue, and you're probably safer kind of hitting it at an angle like this, spraying along the top, maybe catching it in the back like that to get the handle gold and then the gradient fade into blue. And you're going to do that on both of these sides. And then as a nice finishing touch, what I did, again, not super lore specific, but I actually took the spray paint, held it out like this, put it at an angle like this, and I very gently sprayed upwards. Metallic primers have essentially little silver particles in them, or little metallic particles, go figure, and then kind of coagulate and then mist down onto your box, which gives it kind of the sparkly metal color on the exterior. Once that's done, you've got this guy primed and painted, okay? You're getting close now to the lighting. But there's one thing you want to do before that, and really that depends on how extra you want to be. I had my hole in the bottom, okay? I want to be able to put things in here and leave them in there and not worry about them falling out of the bottom, so on and so forth. So I kept the lid. I spray painted it the exact same way that I spray painted the box, but then I did one more final thing so that I could just pop it in and off the bottom. I took these magnets, they're $5 for 4 of them, and I glued them to this piece here. I then took the corresponding corners, and these are the magnets, by the way, if you're curious. Corresponding corners. I took the magnets, I made sure that the magnets would affix, so real noob mistake for magnetizing anything is to essentially put your magnets in backwards and then they actually repel each other rather than sticking. So make sure that you've got your magnets facing the right way. I took what, again, being a miniature painters use, which is called green stuff. Now, essentially, you see there's 2 colors in this brick here, yellow, yellowish green, and blue. When you take the blue and combine it with the yellow, it actually creates green stuff. Essentially, it's this kind of molding stuff. You can create shapes out of it, work with your hands. It's not particularly toxic. You can create a shape with it and then fit it into stuff. I wrapped the magnets in there around the metallic pieces, and then I actually molded it into the inside of this so that I had 2 mounting points for my magnets on the inside that my corresponding magnets on the back of this could pop onto. And now I have a sometimes way too sturdy magnet system that, boom, that's not going anywhere. I can actually put weight on this, aka my lights, without losing any of my internal organs. So, our frame is done. All we really have to worry about now is lighting. I think probably most people assume lighting's the hardest part. It really isn't. Essentially what you do is, it really depends on the effect you're going for. What I wanted to do was capture coils of light forming through, kind of in these tubes. And so the way I did that was I picked up this do-it-yourself neon wire kit. These are seriously $10. You can get them online. You can get them on Amazon. They cost nothing. Neon lights are weird in the way that they manage heat. So actually small, thin neon lights don't put off a lot of heat. So you actually don't have to worry about temperature when you're working with things with these. Again, if they're bigger tubes of neon lights, you do need to be cognizant of the temperature. But I grabbed my neon lights and I took wire, just your regular, 1-2 millimeter wire gauge, and I twisted that wire into a frame. Now, this looks like chaos, but it actually is pretty intentional in the way I did it. I created a circular wire cage, and then I created another circular wire cage inside of it, just twisted the wire into each other. It doesn't have to be perfect. You want a little bit of organic. The one thing I did do was I created these hooks on the ends so that I could put it in and then slide it sideways. So here's my shape. In, slide, and then sit it at the position I wanted it to, okay? Once the wireframe was done, I took my neon lights, this guy right here, and I quite literally weaved it into the cage. Once that's done, what you get is this. Now, it's got a little battery pack on the end. Again, this came pre-assembled with that battery pack. The new version I'm working on, I'm going to hopefully do an Arduino board, which allows me to little program in some extra lighting effects. But this is all you really need for lights, but it doesn't put off a whole bunch of light. So what I started to find was this was great kind of in low light settings, but if you had it out during the day, the effect was kind of lost or mitigated. And so what I actually opted to do was, with my initial frame, I wanted to supplement it. And so I grabbed this LED puck. This is just a battery-powered LED puck. It's actually controlled by a remote with different color settings on it. These, again, are like $10, maybe less, maybe like $8. Took this puck, and I'm putting it in the base on top of my magnet. Now you notice this is all pretty easy to take apart, so I need to replace pieces. Nothing's soldered in there or glued in there. The lighting I want to be able to change and be adaptable with, because that's kind of the key component here. And so I kind of designed it around being able to add in components. So, I mean, that's your lighting. Like everyone's, kind of like, that's the hardest part, but it's really quite simple. When I want to get things going, magnet, I start with my wire frame, and I just pop it in there. Boop, boop, boop. Nice and easy. Turn it over. I turn the lights on. So we've got lights. Okay. Now there's your kind of initial starting lighting. You can see the coiling. I don't know how great it's going to show up on these cameras or on these lights because it's really intense, but you got your coiling in there. You can see it doesn't come through the corners, which gives it that depth and that feeling that you're looking into a pane, into a different space. So there you go. And then if you want to go a little bit extra, I take my puck, I take my magnet base, I put my puck like that, turn it back up, line everything up, make a bunch of noise, and boom. My shape's all together, nothing's coming out of the bottom, everything's in, all good to go. Take my remote from my puck light, and I press the on button, and there you go. Now you've got a little more intense light for kind of those daylight settings. It's also kind of neat just to play around with things. The one I bought has a fade setting, so again, this is not lore friendly, but if you want to fade it through different lights, its shapes, and things like that, you can say, oh, it's gone evil, all those kinds of things. But again, Matt really talks about that grayish light, like dull light coming through. So kind of sticking with blue or gray lights are going to be your best opportunity there. Again, depending upon how thick your paint has gone on and the type of glass on your terrarium. But that's it. Once you've put all that together, you have your very own beacon, complete with a fragment of the Luxon inside, radiating out.